The general medium of exchange function, that's the one that rules the roost. And so if we want to ask whether Bitcoin is serving as money in any particular place, and Lyn makes a very important point, most monies are not money everywhere. They're money in certain places. And so we can ask the same question of Bitcoin, where is it money? There are places where it qualifies more than in others, for sure. Bitcoin deep.
It's more difficult to obtain something like Bitcoin these days because it's the bare item that you can truly keep. The long-term network is still a topic of debate.
I think the challenge with that definition is that it almost kind of presupposes that you can't have any money, because if money is a commonly accepted medium of exchange, it's one of those things where anyone's overly stickler on that term is going to miss emerging trends in money, or maybe emphasize them less than they might otherwise would. And so I instead view money as more like a spectrum, where I generally would prefer that three-part view of money. I think that's a more accurate way of actually assessing the moneyness of something. Because, for example, you can look at, say, art, like a Picasso painting, right? That's a store of value, right? But it's not liquid. It's not fungible. It's a rather poor form of money, as you know. But it's a store of value. It's a bare asset. You can hold the Picasso. You can self-custody it. With Bitcoin, you have something that's a store of value, but then, unlike a Picasso, and then even more so than, say, stock and things like that, it's liquid, fungible, and a bare asset, self-custodiable. So you can, it's basically designed in such a way that you can trade the store of value for other things rather easily. And so I think it has better characteristics of money than many other things. And so when you're looking at the moneyness of something, I mean, basically, like, Egyptian pounds and kroners are both kind of not very good stores of value. The kroner is historically better than an Egyptian pound in that regard, but they're both essentially melting ice cubes. In their jurisdictions, they're 10 out of 10 for a medium of exchange. When you go outside of their artificial monopoly, essentially their own country, they're like a 0 out of 10 or 1 out of 10 for medium of exchange. I mean, they're quite poor. And whereas something like gold or Bitcoin, there's no area that's really as dense as these areas are in terms of their uses as a medium of exchange, right? So you go to Egypt, every single person there practically accepts Egyptian pounds. Gold, it'll take a little bit more friction to get it off your hands, but it will, it's not rocket science to find a way to do that. And whereas Bitcoin and gold and things like that, even dollars when you're outside of the country, they have decent salability, but they're never going to be as dense as a local monopoly currency, right? So I think the challenge with that definition is that it only really applies once something has already matured as a money. And I think it's not a very useful definition when we're analyzing an emergent asset for its potential moneyness, initially as a store of value, but then also saying how can this actually be used as money.
Bitcoin is a type of digital asset that is created to be liquid, fungible, and simple to exchange. The fact that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value is another argument against it being used as money. The value of Bitcoin, according to detractors, is decided by speculative market forces rather than any real assets. Alden responds to this claim by stating that market forces eventually decide the value of any item, including traditional forms of money like gold.
What are the characteristics of gold that have held the test of time in this regard?
Well, mainly that it's long-lasting, right? So it's very resistant to the elements. It's rather fungible liquid to a pretty high degree. And then, unlike many other commodities, it has a very high stock to flow ratio, meaning that it's very hard to make more of it relative to the amount that we already have. So the supply inflation rate is rather stable compared to most other commodities. And shells also emerged on multiple continents as kind of early forms of proto money, as far as people can tell. And the difference was that once we achieved a certain level of technology, we rendered shells to be a poor form of money. Whereas gold is along with some other precious metals, but especially gold, is essentially the one commodity that we don't know how to increase at a rapid supply. NYDIG did a chart a year or two ago that showed gold over the past century, the estimated supply inflation rate of gold, above ground gold, and it was a narrow band between 1% and 2%, almost like clockwork for a century, averaging around 1.5% per year. And that, that basically along with its, its high level of durability and resistance to corrosion and all of that. That's part of why it has such a high stock flow. That makes it pretty good properties of money. Really, the only shortcomings it has is that it's not very divisible, right? Even a small, tiny gold coin historically was, more than like a week's, days or weeks worth of wages. That's why silver was highly used for a long period of time, because it had better divisibility for everyday use. And then number two is that it's not very fast, right? If you want to do global commerce, once we invented telecommunication systems in the 1800s, basically the telephone, the telegraph, undersea cables, we started linking all of our ledgers together. Settling with gold is just a more time-consuming process, and it's also hard to assay it. It's hard to verify that something's actually gold. It's pretty easy to do in small amounts. I mean, if a gold coin's useful and kind of comes at a premium because it's not very cost-effective to fake a gold coin, whereas gold bars, you can do things with tungsten, you can wrap things around it, have similar density. It's a more costly process if you want to have a pretty high velocity, right? So you have to abstract it in some way. That's why you had gold-backed fiat currencies. And one of the advantages of Bitcoin, I mean, it does have some shortcomings relative to gold. I'm more confident that gold's going to be here 5,000 years from now than Bitcoin, right? If I had to pick between the two. But what essentially Bitcoin does is comes up with a very scarce liquid commodity with its own settlement layer, and has those similar properties. But unlike gold, it can actually move about the same speed as fiat. You can settle it globally in an hour. With a Lightning Network, you can settle it in seconds on smaller amounts. And so that's kind of where its niche falls.
Just like with any other asset, the market supply and demand determine the value of Bitcoin. Watch this exclusive video with Lyn Alden, a renowned economist and proponent of the cryptocurrency, to learn the truth about Bitcoin. Join us as Lyn dispels Bitcoin's myths and misunderstandings and explains why it's the currency of the future. Don't miss out by clicking the like button, subscribing, and contributing to the discussion with your comments.
So I think one of the key innovations, or one of the key things that Bitcoin brings to the table, is that the actual bearer asset can move around quickly rather than just claim on that asset. And I think one of the downsides, so I don't disagree with anything you said, but the challenge is that when you have something that relies on abstraction in order to move around efficiently, the challenge there is that it's easy to break that promise, break that peg, break that redeemability, and that's what we saw happen with literally every jurisdiction in the world. That you had the system, and I've argued that it's essentially that speed mismatch between commerce and the underlying settlement that allowed for governments and banks to be able to arbitrage that speed difference and eventually be able to break it. And when they broke it, and they had these fiat-only systems, the fact that if you could just teleport gold around and between people like mentally, right? It'd be really hard for fiat currencies to develop because what is their possible advantage over gold? And instead, their advantage was they were this big interlinked global ledger that could move around, and gold couldn't keep up, and so gold got rendered to just being a savings asset, for the most part, and a still a saleable, global asset, but not that quick medium of exchange that you have with fiat. And I think what Bitcoin essentially does is it says, okay, here's something that moves at the speed of fiat, but has the scarcity of gold, at least in the supply inflation rate sense. And so you have, I think, a reasonable shot at something where people can actually hold on to the underlying. They can self-custody the underlying. They can move around the underlying globally without relying on that counterparty trust.
According to Alden, the world economy is continually changing, which will lead to the emergence of new types of currencies. Due to its decentralized nature, Bitcoin has the potential to become a global currency independent of all centralized authorities. Because of this, it has a level of security and independence that is not present in conventional forms of money. In conclusion, some people can be skeptical of and criticize Lyn Alden's claims that Bitcoin is a type of money and a means of trade. Nevertheless, her conclusions are supported by strong economic theories and a thorough comprehension of the nature of money. It's critical that we all remain educated and continue to educate ourselves on this fascinating but difficult subject as the cryptocurrency world continues to develop. Despite not being regarded as a traditional form of money, Bitcoin is still a beneficial addition to the economy because of its liquidity and bear asset characteristics. It also has the ability to alter the current monetary system because it is decentralized. It's crucial to keep in mind that as the economy changes, new types of money will also do the same. It will be interesting to watch how Bitcoin adoption and use change in the ensuing years as we advance. The obvious question in everyone's mind is this the future of Binance? Lyn Alden brilliantly makes the case for Bitcoin as a workable form of money. Comment below to join the discussion and express your ideas. For more educational information, don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for this video.